Yeah, we're good. Okay. Let's go ahead. Let's get started since it's 9 o'clock. Hopefully, more people will show up. You've got the sub for training here. David is South sick, so I've got his training materials, and I think I know what's going on. So we'll get through it. But the first thing you're going to do is, for anybody that's remote, they're going to have to VPN in. So you'll remote in through your Timberline VPN for remote services. Once you're logged in then to the software, to the network, then you're going to double click this Timberscan application. And if it's your first time opening up the application, you guys go back. Pablo's getting around and adding it up onto your desktops. If he's been there, great. If he hasn't, he should be there today or tomorrow or so. But once you log on, your initial login is your first initial and your last name. If your last name, it's truncated at 8 characters. So if your last name is too long, it's going to be your first initial and then 7 characters of your last name. I'm logging in as David here. The very first time you log on, the password is capital P. So password with a capital P. It'll ask you then to create a new password. Once you create the new password, then the system will go out, and then you'll have to double-click Timberscan to go back in, and then your name and your password that you created, and you should be good to go. Now, I don't know if everybody has the handout, and we send it out to the remotes, the supers, and up to Northern California. But every time you get an invoice that you have to approve, you're going to get an email notification. There's a picture of it in here, but it basically says it's an automatic Timberscan email that goes out that says you have invoices to approve and who sent them to you, whether it's Jinky, Charmaine, Taylor, or Pearl. It'll tell you who sent that invoice to you. That's your one and only indicator that you have invoices to approve. There's not a reminder system set up in Timberscan at this point. They are working on that. They know that it's a feature that people want, but it's not out yet. So that will be coming. But right now, that's the only notification you get is that initial email. Once you go into the system, then the invoices can stay in there in your queue as long as until you approve them, and they'll just sit in there. But you won't get a reminder. You will get another reminder if Pearl sent you a batch of invoices, and then Jinky sent you a batch of invoices, or Taylor. You will get another reminder that more invoices came from another user, but not of the original invoices. They'll still be in your queue, but you just won't get the reminder. So once you pull this thing up, all we're going to really talk about today is the approving, or this approve menu. So when you go into this approve button, in here it says that David has 6 invoices to approve. We'll click on those. It'll come up here, and the easiest thing to do is accept all invoices. That'll give you everything. You can sort it if you want. Like if you're working on multiple jobs, you can go in there and say, I only want jobs for Delray Crossing or whatever it is. And it'll sort those invoices out. But accepting all of them will bring up every invoice that you have. When this comes up, you're going to have kind of two sections of the screen. Let me just point this out because it came up. But every invoice that has a note or a comment attached to it, you will get this pop-up that comes up that says you have notes, and you can read the notes. You don't have to read them, but it does alert you that they're there, and then you can close them. So on this screen here, you've got kind of 3 sections, really. The body of the invoice up here, and the very first time you log on, you'll want to click on these 2 buttons up here, image size and thumbnails. What that does over here is the thumbnail is what gives you the multiple pages of the invoice. So you can see that this invoice only has 1 page, but if it has multiple pages, you'll see all the thumbnails to the left. And then you can go and grab whatever page you want or scroll through them. And then down below, you have 2 other sections. The first one is the header section, which is this one up here. That's the total invoice amount. And then down below, you have the distribution of where it's going to go. When you guys get these invoices, you're going to have a couple of different options. The first one I just want to talk about, you won't use too often, is the reject button. So this, yeah.
Yes, Eric.
So I see the job number off to the left, and it's 3491. So the account, what is that? Is that the cost code?
Cost code would be your cost code for that line item. So it's going to job 30.
So under accounts, that 1,300, that 13,000
That's a
number.
general ledger account.
Okay.
So
So if you're approving the invoice, is there a list of codes to put in there? Because typically I work with just job numbers.
you just work with job numbers, not general ledger codes.
But that'll all be pre-populated when you
Okay,
get it.
all right, perfect.
So you don't have to worry.
All right.
So-
thanks.
So the initial invoice, when it comes to you, accounting will code it, and they'll put in what subcontract it is, what job it is. They'll code the information in there. It'll be sent to you. If you agree with that distribution and that coding, then you can just accept and we can move forward. If you want to change the cost code or what have you, then you can drill down and we can change it. And we'll get into that too.
Okay, sorry.
So the first thing I want to talk about is this reject button down here. And what we want to do with rejects is, let me start with the things we don't want to reject. If the first thing you don't want to reject is if you want to revise the amount. If you get the invoice and it's $500 and you say, I'm not paying $500, I only want to pay $300, you don't reject that back to accounting. What you do, like you do today, is you cross out the 5, you write the 3, and you send it back to accounting. So you would go in and change your amount of your invoice. You guys have complete power to change the amount of your invoice on the header and on the distribution. And so you would correct the invoice amount. Say, I only want to pay $300, you change it, approve it, and it'll go back to accounting and we'll pay $300.
And Stan, you might mention at that point, that's the perfect time to make a comment.
Okay.
So you open the comment and you list out what your reasoning is behind that, and then that is forever saved with that invoice. So when we see it back to us in accounting, we're gonna know why there was a change from what we initially
And I'll talk about comments too. The other thing to not reject an invoice for is for subcontracts. If we're going to process subcontracts as they're billed, so they'll come out with the original contract, they'll come out with change orders. If you get an invoice that doesn't have a change order approved on it and they're billing on that amount, Pearl or Jinky or whoever's coding it, they'll give you a comment on there. So when you open up the invoice, the comment will come up and says it needs change order number 2 to be approved and put in the system. So what you'll need to do is you don't reject that invoice back to accounting. What you're going to have to do is get your change order, get it approved, get that change order to accounting, we'll input it into Timberline, then we can go back in, then you can go back into Timberscan and allocate to that change order amount. If you don't want to do the change order, then what you'll have to do is revise the amount of the subcontract billing. You'll approve it for a lower amount or a different amount. But don't reject it because you need a change order, because then it's just going to go back to accounting, who's going to have to still wait for your change order, and then they're going to send it back to you. So hold on to the invoice. Even though you don't finish an invoice, it could stay in your queue. So if you go into the invoice and you say, I got to get a change order done, go on to the next invoice, process it, the old invoice will still be there. It will still be waiting for you to do. So reasons to reject an invoice would basically be as if you don't want to pay the invoice. So on the accounts payable side, if you want the invoice voided or it's not your invoice, it belongs, so you want to void it out, you reject it back to accounting. If it's not your invoice, it belongs to a different job, it needs to go to a different routing or workflow, you would reject that back to accounting. And the same thing on the subcontract side. If it's not your workflow, which is going to be very rare on the subcontract side, you would reject it back to accounting. But also if you're rejecting the subcontract and you're going to pay it through AP, you would have to reject that back to accounting as well. Now when you reject an item, every time you reject an item, you have to make a comment. I'm just going to go to an invoice, the third invoice in, because I know this invoice, we're going to reject it. So it's coming up and giving you a warning that's saying that you're overcommitting yourself. These are the notes that come up. I'm going to just close them real quick and just to reject this. So when I click reject on this invoice, it's going to come up and say, who do you want to reject it to? You can go backwards as far back to accounting, or if you wanted to go back to the superintendent or to an assistant project manager, whoever, you can reject it back to that level of individual. This one only has accounting who did it. So I'm going to say data entry level 1, and I'm just going to put in here wrong job as my comment. I click OK. Now that comment will be saved, and now it's going to go back to Pearl. And when she opens it up, she'll see that it was rejected because I put on wrong number. But whatever that rejection reason is, we would put that on there and send it back in. Any questions on rejects? Yeah.
Just one quick question. So after you hit OK, I'm assuming obviously it automatically went back to Pearl, but it didn't seem like the screen changed at all. How do we know that it's actually been rejected out of our workflow?
So it did reject, it went to a different invoice, it went to the next invoice in your queue.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Yeah. So that one is now gone out of your queue and rejected back to whoever we selected. We selected data entry, which was accounting. The new form. Yeah, you can mention that.
So Stan has streamlined our billing form, and if you'll notice, I know that's small, but there's no longer an area for you to initial down at the bottom, because now you're going to be electronically doing that. Accounting is has been pushed to get every sub on every single job that's active, a partially populated billing form, and then we're forcing them to submit them via email. So you're going to start seeing on the subcontract side billing forms that look just like this. We'll put in their exact subcontract number and their vendor number, the job number and the job name, and kick it out to them and specify to them some instructions that it's only authorized for them to email it in. That specific form is for that specific contract, especially for someone like Brian Cox Mechanical, who's maybe on 8 jobs. You're going to get 8 separate invoices, pre-populated, one for each active contract. And it's going to be percentage driven from now on. So they can't just pick and choose net dollars that they want to see. You're going to have to put in a very specific percentage. So they'll have to sort that out on their end to get where they want dollar-wise and populate everything by a percentage. A lot of the fields are locked, so they can't mess it up. You're just looking for them to bill out their dollars and not make any other changes on there. So it's going to end up being very useful. It's going to take a little bit of getting them on board with us. Okay? Yes, Rachel?
Stan, I got a question on the rejection.
Yeah.
So if it comes and, it's been approved by the superintendent and then it's to project management, but we have a question on it, do we reject it and with our question it goes back to them to answer the question, or what's that process supposed to look like?
Yeah, so if you have a question back on somebody who's already approved it in that line, you can make a comment and send it back to them and say, I'm rejecting this for whatever your question is. Did we double check this? Does this happen? Whatever the case is, you can reject that back to that individual.
Okay.
So, and Stan, on the rejecting them to the lower, there's tiers of approval, right? What tier is the superintendent's tier versus the assistant project manager or PE numbers? Because there's 3 or 4 tiers, right?
That's a good question. What I'll do is, one thing that Timberscan hasn't been able to do very well is define the levels. And so a superintendent is a level 4, and you would see them as the level 4 would be the person you rejected to. What I'll do is we have a template, and I'll email it out to all of you guys so you can see who the approver is at what level. Everybody has a defined level. So like the superintendent may be level 4, they're always going to be level 4. And then the next person would be a level 5 or 6, or however you go up the line. We had to define it that way because that's how Timberscan does their ranking, is by levels, not by titles.
Okay, yeah. So because on the jobs we've been testing this on, I've rejected it, but it's gone back to Pearl or Jinky in lieu of going to Sean or Mike or whatever. So
I know exactly what you're saying. I'll email that template out so you guys have that. It's a little bit clunky right now.
Is there a workflow that starts from define that workflow?
Whatever workflow you're right. So they'll see it when they reject it.
So we can see a workflow and it starts accounting. Then what if I get who's next is the superintendent? Then from the superintendent it goes to someone. Whatever that workflow is, and what if I get something that I would rather have to go to Geyer? Can I, kick it off to someone that's maybe not associated with what?
No. So Geyer's not in your workflow?
Well, he may not be, but it's coming. I get invoices. I'm trying to follow the blue folder route. Sometimes I get a blue folder and I don't even want. It doesn't even apply to me. It needs to go directly to Geyer in the same fashion. How do we just kick it off to
So if you get an
The person needs
invoice,
to be approving it.
that would be one of the items that you would reject. If you get an invoice that's not your workflow, it's not your job, it's not related to.
Yes, but it needs to come, I'll look at it later, after they've gone through all their reviews.
Oh.
We go to the superintendent,
Yep.
the material superintendent.
Always
So
go to
essentially you
A.
get it at the very end, and then it would come to me for final
Yeah.
review.
So the workflow is designed to go out to the super first. On a
He gets
material
the email,
invoice.
super gets email, we didn't get copied on it.
They'll get the email, you won't even see that.
Yes.
They would approve it, and it would go to the next approver. So let's say that's Guyer in this case. Guyer will get an email that says, hey, the superintendent approved it, you have one invoice to approve. He approves it, it goes to you. Then when you approve it, then it'll come back to accounting for final review and then payment.
And Heidi's done an outstanding job of updating the current job list, because that's where we're getting our workflow from right now. So if you get an invoice and you know you always want Guyer to see that first for a certain job, let us know in accounting.
Yes.
So we can make an adjustment on the workflow.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Now, so Rachel, you had,
So I was just wondering when these forms are sent out to the subcontractors, like in the beginning of the month, or what if they have a random billing? How does that, how do you get prompts to send it out?
So we're sending those out in accounting. It doesn't have any dollar value in it, Rachel, when we send it. We just get them,
Okay.
and they'll follow the regular billing cycle for subcontractors. They'll have all month up until the 25th to get.
Populate that form?
Yes.
Yeah, just the specific contract number, vendor number, job name. And we don't put in their contract value or any of those items.
Gotcha.
Hey, Stan,
yeah.
good question is to kind of go back on the invoices. I know there's going to be a lot of questions, but for example, like when we get concrete invoices, and you've got, 50 different tags from the trucks, and sometimes there's maybe 10 of them that are charging standby time, and we're rejecting the standby time with whatever we got worked out. How does that work?
Yeah, so let me go back an invoice. I think I got a material invoice here. So this is a material invoice that I've got up here, and I know it's hard to see the line items because the resolution's a little bit clunky, but you've got 4 line items on this invoice. So if we don't want to pay an invoice for, let's say it's $50, we can come in here to the amount, and I can change this to 30602, and I can change the amount of that. When I do it up here in that header, I need to then go down below into the distribution and change it as well. Why did that say? I might have to tab out of it. And then I come down here and I change it. Now that's what I've done to change the amount. So if I wanted to take out the standby time, I would remove it from the invoice. I would take it off of here and change the amount. Now we can do 2 things. One thing is we can annotate on the drawing. So I can bring a text box in, and I can say in here, that I change the amount. Oh, I got, what did I just do?
You just forwarded it all to Warner.
His phone's blowing up right now.
So there's a tool on the right-hand side, because we can't see it through the screen, but there's a tool on the right-hand side to, I guess, update the PDF with verbiage or strikeouts or stuff like that, like Bluebeam.
Yeah, so this is the post-it, so you can drag it on here. What I didn't do is double-click on it. You got to double-click it to type on it. So this is an annotation, and over here on the right, you can make these annotations with the text box. You can use the pen to draw on it, or you can use a highlighter for it. These little arrows over here to the left will change the thickness of it, and the arrow below it will change the color. And it's the same thing for a pen, a highlighter, and then a text box. If you have a highlighter, you can drag around it in circles. Oops.
Okay.
You can drag a highlighter and you can circle amounts on it if you want. You can change that thickness with all of these arrows. One thing to keep in mind when you annotate something and you say I changed the amount, These annotations, so the text box, the highlighting, the writing on the invoice, all of those annotations are not permanent, meaning they can be deleted, and they can be deleted by anybody in the approval chain. So if you put this box on here, somebody could come by and you say, the next approver says, okay, you changed the amount, I don't need this box anymore, I'm going to delete it and remove it. That can happen with all the annotations. Comments stay permanent, and comments always stay with it. So the other thing you can do when you change an invoice is you should come up here and say, change the amount for, what was it? Standby. And now as you save that comment now stays with this invoice permanently. It never goes away. So the next user will see that comment as soon as they open up the invoice, they'll see it and know that you changed the invoice amount. You can use these for, however you want to use it. If you want to send a message to the next approver in the line, you can use a comment to do that. William, did that answer what you were looking for?
Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay. So that's also how you change your amounts on here, annotate the thing, and do different, whatever you have with it. Now, if I, at this point, down here, I'm going to unprocess that invoice. So at this point here, I've changed the amount, I've annotated on it, and I'm ready to send it to the next approver. What I would do is click on this approve button down here. When I click on approve, that's going to put it in my outgoing queue, so to speak, and it will go to the next invoice. So this is my next invoice in my queue. And then I would go through the same process here. This one is a subcontract, and the same thing would happen here is if you didn't want to pay one of these change orders, or for whatever reason you wanted to alter amounts, you can alter the amount right on here. So if you don't agree with the amount they're billing, you guys change it. You change it, you make a comment in there to Pearl or Jinky saying, I changed the amount, or I deleted the amount of change order 1, we're not billing that this month. Whatever it happens to be, you guys can change it and approve it, and it'll go forward.
Yeah. One thing you have to keep in mind, gentlemen, is the amount on the top has to agree with the amount on the bottom. So on the top, the header, you're getting a total. So if you go down and you delete a value in one of the lines down below, you'll also need to populate up so that our totals are, it's not going to let you move forward.
So what we can do is if we delete out, like if we go into this subcontract invoice and we say we're not going to pay anything on change order 2, I can come down in the distribution and delete out these amounts. But now what will happen is down here up in the header, I've got $25,056 on the invoice. That's the total invoice in the header. Down in the distribution, I have the $24,395. So I come up here and I change that to my $24,395, and now the two will be an equal, and now I can approve it. If you don't change the header and the distribution, you can't approve the invoice. It'll tell you you're off.
Does that automatically account for retention? Because I know sometimes Pearl and I have gone back and forth when we change, a change order amount or a contract amount. You need to obviously calculate retention on that. Are these gross dollar amounts that they're billing for?
Yeah,
net?
you're going to enter gross, and then the retainage will calculate.
Okay.
And Jason, you had a question?
I think it answered for me. So you have to do the math.
Yes.
You actually have to do the math. It's not when you remove it, it doesn't remove it for you. You actually have to keep calculator out.
But it looks like it totals it.
However,
There's
correct.
2 totals.
Yeah.
Correct, Randy.
But yeah, on the bottom, it looked like once you removed it, it changed. But then you need to copy it on top.
Yeah.
That was my question. The screen answered it for me.
Okay. Any other questions on changing amounts?
Can you just copy the lower total and paste it in the upper amount, or do you have to manually type that in?
I haven't really tried that. Let's give it a try. Yep, you can copy Control-V and Control-C. Now my amounts will be off. I can't approve it. So we'll delete that guy and make it inbound. So
Tracy undo.
maybe. It probably does work that way.
Is there a back or undo button?
There,
Let's say you, like what you just did right there, you accidentally cut and paste the wrong lines.
I think you can cancel that. it'll send you back up to the top.
Is there an arrow up in the top and the middle or no?
You know what? I just lost my distribution though, Taylor.
We just have over.
Where have you guys had that come up? Have you had to undo something you typed in?
I think I just retyped it.
Yeah, say no. Don't say which.
Yeah, I'm not sure of that question.
Yeah.
David, are you online?
So you could try and,
You get the back
you
of
could
it.
try and exit out, it's gonna say save changes, to say no, and that'd be the
It's
same.
gonna go
Well, that's completely undoing everything that was worked on though.
Okay.
Not just, oh, I typed in $50 and it should have been something different. Because these over here, I don't know that answer. We'll have to,
Well, there's gonna be
We'll have to
something
get
that we
back
have
on
to
that.
get back, yeah.
What are those arrows on the right-hand side? One looks like.
these are rotate buttons.
Okay,
So this will
gotcha.
rotate
Okay,
your
okay.
invoice.
All right.
And different things there. So, so after you're ready to approve your invoice, you click on approve again, this will go to your next invoice that's in your queue. One thing that, let's make sure here. One thing to keep in mind, I gotta go through and approve. You guys help me here. If I want to now finish what I've done with those two, see this button down here where it says finished? Even though I've approved 2 invoices, when you approve the invoices, they still stay in your purview, so to speak. So, for example, this went on to my next invoice. If I go back to previous invoice, you can see down here now my approve button turned into unprocessed. So it's still in your queue. It's still yours to deal with. If you want to unapprove that invoice, you would unprocess it. Then it would be back to you. The reason I'm telling you this is that even though you've approved it, it doesn't go to the next person until you click on finish. So you're going to go through, you're going to change your invoices, you're going to approve it, goes to the next one, approve it, approve it, approve it. You're going to finish and complete your process. So when you click finish, then this is going to come up and say, here's what you've done. You worked on these 4 invoices. These 2 are processed. These 2 are still in your queue. Is this all good to go forward? We'll say okay. And now it'll tell you that there were 2 invoices that you approved and that you sent on for $25,362. You say okay, it'll take you out of that screen and it'll take you back to kind of your home page. Okay? So that's important to know because if you approve 3 invoices and then you don't finish it and send them on and you get out of Timberscan and you leave and go do something else, if you come back into Timberscan, you'll have to reapprove those invoices, which is kind of a bummer, but that is the case. They'll still be in your queue waiting to be approved. So you'll have to approve them again and then send them on their way by finishing them off. Yeah.
Will your comments be erased?
Hold on. Hold on, we had a question in here.
So if I'm in there approving invoices, I need to make sure I finish up or I'm wasting my time.
No, you just won't be able to exit Timberline. If you close Timberline and exit out of Timberline, you would lose your changes. You would lose the approved invoices. In the sense that you'd have to go back in and approve them. If you leave your desk and they're in your queue as approved, you're not going to lose them.
Okay.
What was your question?
I was just saying, if you forget to like finish and they end up not being approved, do you still do you lose any comments that you did or any adjustments?
The comments will stay, but you'll have to approve the invoice.
Okay.
The other thing too to keep in mind is that even though you approved it, it hasn't gone on to the next person. So if you approve it and you leave your desk and you never finish it, it won't get to the next approver. It'll still be in your queue. Okay. The other thing to note here is if we go back into these invoices, and this I think was going back to something Eric you mentioned earlier. If you want to change, let me see if I have one that's not a job. Are these all job invoices? Is there any general ledger one?
Well, we can change it to
I think you have
Okay.
to do more.
So down in here, I know you probably won't change your jobs very often because if it's the wrong job number, it's probably in the wrong workflow and you reject it back to accounting. But let's just go into the detail of the job. And you can type in the job number of what you know it is, or down here there's a list, and that list will bring up the jobs that are in the system. So you can type in and send it to Tyler's job. And say, okay, and we now change the job. So there's a list, or you can type over it. If you don't know the job number, you know, you can pull up this list, you can scroll through and look for it. You can type in this category, I think, and then you can start typing in Bighorn, because you know it's Bighorn, you just didn't remember, oh, it's Penthouse B, it's this job. So that drop-down list will let you scroll through options that you want, both for job, for cost code, and it will for account as well. If you come into account, you can then scroll through and you can see all the general ledger accounts that you want to do it. So if, you know, if somebody got an invoice, you know, in the for the general ledger, like say Chris got an invoice or David got an invoice and it was to computers, and he gets it and says, oh, this is software, he can go in and change the general ledger account to send it from hardware to software and save that change and then approve it on its way. So you can make all those changes down here in the distribution.
We'll start with accounting though, making the original.
Yes. Yeah, so Taylor will get it and we'll code it to computer hardware. She'll send it then to David for approval. He'll get it and say, this is really software. He can change then the distribution account and then approve it and, you know, send it on to Chris or whoever.
We have is the cost coding same as what we've already established at Timberline?
Mm-hmm.
So all those codes are in there. What if we wanted to add codes?
If you add codes, you got to add codes in Timberline first. Because this is a mirror image of Timberline. It's basically drawing everything from Timberline into itself. And so when you make updates like that, like adding a change order or things like that, has to go back to the software of Timberline first.
Do we have a current printout of all the codes that we can look at and see if there's anything we want to make?
I got like a small general chart that I go off of.
I think we've talked in some of our accounting for self-performed work, breaking out some of those categories with structural concrete that encompasses everything. Actually be nice to see based on the area of self-performed work that we do, how to designate foundation, slab, tilt up. We've talked about just trying to get a better accounting so that we know what we're spending on costs, everything else. So if we could look at talk with you and see if there's a way to incorporate.
Yeah.
So
and
the superintendents,
also,
you know, designate the areas that we cross-check with our budgets, estimates specific to those sections. But they're kind of all lumped into one big thing that we do a separate spreadsheet to try and track those things.
Well, it would be a separate conversation, I think, from here, but we also have Procore too. Because I think our codes match Procore now, right? Anyway, I think it's
another topic, but
another
if
topic
we get a list of what it is,
yeah.
at least we could
Okay.
go for that.
Sometimes we'll write some POs and we'll charge multiple jobs. This is probably gonna eliminate the ability to
Nope.
You can do multiple job numbers for invoices?
Yeah. And so down in here, I don't have a good example of that, but she'll code that invoice to 5 different jobs. You'll see down here in that distribution down here. Oh, my mouse is going crazy. You'll see all 5 of those jobs down here in the distribution. So you'll see which ones she's charged to and which ones have.
I think what Eric's saying, you got the hub up there, and he's got one invoice, but maybe he's going to send half of the material for one job and the other half to another job. Can he go in and split that invoice up?
Yeah. So if you wanted to come in here and say, oops. So if you're adding a line item, if you hit tab at the end, it'll add a new line item, and you can tab over and
Add it and put in a dollar amount.
Yeah. So I can change that, and then we can make it. It'll pre-fill in the amount because 2,000 is left to go, so it put it in there. But if you change that to 1,000, oops, and now you tab again, you'll add another line, and you can say, you know, this is how I want this to be distributed.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have complete control over the allocation of this invoice, as well as the amount. If you want to change the amount, you change the amount, change the allocation, and then you approve it.
Schuster improperly allocates, and we can move to other jobs.
Yeah. I'm just going to pick random.
Yeah.
What are your job numbers?
I don't have any. So good luck.
So then when you make changes, you would come up here in the comments and you can say distribution to add jumps. And then so whoever that goes to next, they'll have that note and say, oh, I see why you did that. You changed it to allocate the amounts. Whatever comment you make, they'll see it.
Now, if you approve too soon, it's gonna come back with a red line, tell you where you, at the end, if you eliminated a step that it needs and you accidentally push approve or you get confused and push approve, it's gonna bring you back and kind of point out where you're lacking.
Yeah, so if I'm off, like right now, I changed my amount, and this up here is saying that your invoice amount, that's saying the header is 3,114, but your distribution is only 2,000. So you can't process until you correct that. Once that error is there, then you fix your amount, and now you're good to approve.
Does that work with whoever puts it in originally? Because what if the PDF's different than the line below? Check those.
The PDF, the scanned invoice, once you change amounts, will be off, and that's why you need to enter comments. So the comments are in there, or you can add that text thing.
I'm saying initially a sheet, because now there's another step, right, where we have more typing, right, compared to the original.
Our initial input to you guys should match the PDF, because we don't know any different.
Yeah.
So our invoice is going to be the 3,114. We're going to send that off to you. If you get there and say, I'm not paying that $1,000, and you change the invoice amount, now the PDF will be off. That's the value of the comments and the text box to say, I deleted $1,000 for whatever reason.
It should match when it gets to us.
It will match when it gets to you.
Are you talking about you,
Taylor's
Taylor?
doing it.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll match when it gets to you, but if you go through and change the amounts, and you then approve it, when Tyler gets it, his PDF and your amounts won't match. That's why he'll need the comments or your notes to say, why did we change it?
Unless it's a subcontract. Subcontract, it's going to be different because if there's a change order that's not been issued yet, it will not match the PDF. So we can, on the distribution line, we cannot do. So like if the subcontractor is billing 50,000 and then 1,000, the change order has not been issued yet, we can only put 49,000 there. So the PDF and the distribution will match.
Did you guys hear that? Mm-hmm. So on a subcontract, if they bill 50,000 and 1,000 of that is a change order that hasn't been issued, the header will be 50,000, the distribution will be 49. You'll have a note when you open it up, a comment that says, we can't process without change order 4. We'll have to get that change order approved into Timberline. Then once it is there, then we can allocate 1,000 to that change order.
Stand and back up. Jinky and I will have to enter it as 49 and 49 because we have to be in the.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll be looking to you guys to help us decide, are we keeping it at 49 or are we bumping it up to 50? Because you're going to approve a change order, write it, get it back to accounting, and it'll get keyed in, and then be $1,000 value to put into the distribution document. And we're not going anywhere. If you guys have questions one-on-one, it's a lot of information. You can see Taylor, Jinky, myself, we're happy to go over some things as well.
Going somewhere, this is big.
Any other questions on approval on the process? There is more depth to Timberscan. And what we'll do is we'll probably schedule a later time with project management and the guys from Core Associates on the training to go into the reporting and the different things that happen with it. The other thing to point out is that right now, it's all driven from remote services and from the network here. Timberscan Go is going to be out probably in a couple of months, maybe 2 to 3 months, and that will give you everything we just talked about on a mobile device. So on your phone, on your iPad, whatever it is, that will be on your mobile device. And so you can do everything we just talked about on your iPad, which will make it a lot better for superintendents and Northern California who won't have to then VPN and remote services in. But that'll be coming. And once that comes out, we'll and I doubt the training will be too extensive because it really is. We've seen it. It really is basically what we just did. Pretty slick.
So Northern California has to VPN in currently. We're considered remote as well.
Yeah, You guys will have to VPN in.
And then if I might make one suggestion, the Timberscan alert that you have invoices, it's very generic. So maybe check in your junk mail that you get, those alerts we get twice a day, and just kind of be aware that it might have gone in there. So, David's working to make sure that doesn't happen, but in the start, some of ours were in our junk. Just kind of be aware that it's showing up in there.
I think one thing that might be good is for you guys, for every new job, is just to send them, you know, it says, hey, I approved invoices for you. Look for the email, because then they know to look for it. If they don't get it, then we can act. Otherwise, you could go days without knowing.
This is live now?
It's not live yet, but it will be in the next few weeks. Pablo's working feverishly, as you can see back there, installing it on desktops and getting going. But once it's installed everywhere, because we're going to train tomorrow too, same training tomorrow, and then we'll be ready to turn it on and we'll start sending out invoices. One thing that's critical is if you have a paper invoice in your hand right now, you need to get those approved and get those back to accounting, because the system will not update from a paper copy that you have. And until that gets back to accounting, like on subcontracts, those aren't input yet. So our inputting is changing. Our input is changing from the back end on subcontracts to the front end for accounting. And so you got to approve those and get them back to accounting, and they can get them into Timberline so that the software is up to date and that the amounts that we're approving are good. Then your next round of invoices will be scanned in. If you've got paper copies on there from January and we scan in your February one, your amounts aren't going to be right. And so your approval is going to be a little.
This doesn't eliminate our purchase orders though, correct?
Nope. No, you're going to still do your purchase orders. You're going to process them the same way. One thing you don't see on here is that the invoice, as well as all supporting documentation, so a purchase order or a schedule of values, whatever it happens to be, will be attached to that invoice. These have all been pretty simple, but you would have your purchase order, you might have a receiver attached to it. All those supporting documents will be included with the invoice package.
A lot of times, I'm the person who provides that supporting paperwork. How do I upload that up? Like Taylor will send me a fuel bill, and I have to, in order to get that fuel bill approved, I have to have the signed ticket from the superintendent. How do I get that into that system?
I'll bring everything up and I'll scan it and then send it to you for approval, and then it will go to Larry after you, and then back to me for processing and payment. So it changes
So-
the process
so
slightly, but.
I get my paperwork in, and I bring the paperwork to you. Okay. And then you just bring you a stack of it, you try to work those to what? Okay. Awesome.
So all paperwork goes to Taylor.
Yeah.
Big unorganized stacks.
Organized stack.
So if we get a hard copy mailed to us or something, we just send it to accounting and they'll process it from there.
Yeah. So any invoices that you guys get directly, just forward down to Taylor. She'll scan them and route them for approval.
Okay. And that's for all invoices, regardless of job or office or whatever it is.
Yeah. Any other questions? Any questions remotely? Nick?
Has another California. That will be whenever we start receiving emails then for a job.
Yeah, we think that, Paul, you'll have everything installed by tomorrow, you
Tomorrow, the latest, yes.
Yeah. And then we should be good to go.
And it'll be interesting to see the reporting and how it works and how Timberline's going to be affected. Can we just look at this one location for all the information associated with materials and subcontracts and anything else?
Yeah.
That we don't have to look at Timberline?
Yeah. Yeah, and we need, that is true, that is the case. Timberscan will have all your job cost related information. You can drill down into it. We just wanted to get it rolling and get it out.
Sure.
So we'll get probably a project management meeting together and see the job cost reporting.
What things will not be in
We'll
there?
probably have core associates do that training. Just, I think it'll be a little bit better.
So do you know that they sync and talk to each other? They update like every 30 minutes?
They update I think it's every hour. Timberscan goes back to Timberline with any updates. Anything that happens.
will there be any costs in there that don't have invoice documentation with it? There's just plugs of information like credit cards. Where does that all show up?
Credit cards are still going to be paper at this point. The fuel,
That's what I just asked about.
yeah.
I have to turn it, I staple my piece of paper to the invoice I get.
That'll be normal because it's just as I enter it now essentially, but it'll go through Timberscan, so you'll be able to pull up those invoices, but that, I mean, will go live. But if you're talking about like the Wex Bank credit card, that'll usually be once, well, we get that once a month in one big statement.
So are you breaking out those so we know who's applying to what job with those charges?
You'll see the cost how you do now.
Okay. Well, we don't see them now, we just see a line item.
We'll line it.
We don't have an invoice. In other words, we don't get something in our blue folder that says, here's all our fuel. We just get a charge that hits our,
Yeah,
For
then it
ledger.
goes
That's
through
how you
that,
see it.
but that whole statement will eventually be in there.
it will, okay. Good job.
All right, any other questions, you guys?
Do we have to log in daily, or we log in one time and then we automatically, or?
You mean like each day you come in?
Yeah.
Yeah, you should shut it down each night. That helps with Timberline's backups and everything else, but then you just open it up each morning.
Okay, and then log in with the new
Yeah.
craft password.
Yeah.
So it's not-
Okay.
Great job.
All right, thanks you guys.
Thanks, Taylor. This is exciting. This is big.
I don't want to be this huge. They're not good.
Hold on, when was the last time we were in here doing our storyboard?
But I might have that